Oh, wow. Saw it twice, so I was like, oh my God.
That was just weird.
I always used to see a light coming up, like a headlight, but there was nobody there.
Oh, it's just disappeared.
Hello, everybody, on a Sunday night. Welcome to Truth Proof, and great that you're all here. I hope it's been hot where you've been, or maybe you don't hope it's been hot. But we've got a great guest tonight, as in Lee Solway, who's going to share a few of his experiences that he's had throughout life, and very interesting. So, once again, say every week, questions in capital letters, please. Then I can get to them and I'll just take them as they come. Let's see how this one goes, because I'm really looking forward to speaking with this guy. 4:30 this morning, I spoke with a guy from New Zealand who had some interesting experiences, which you're going to get to hear. It might be put up as a random stream like we did with John the other day. I hope you all enjoyed that. And we'll soon get to Lee, but let's just have a quick look in chat. Oh, Christ, we've got like 100 and odd people in already, and we're only going to get a few names, but let's have a look. Sober Carper, Lowry, Lisa, Andy. Well, hey Andy. Hi Andy. Andy, hey. Let's have a look here. Alienate UK, good to meet you other day, mate. And Andy Ghost Whisperer, Richard Burnett. Belated birthday for June. Happy birthday. I missed it on Thursday. My fault. So I hope you had a wonderful birthday, and I hope everybody treat you. I'm sure they will have done. And lovely lady, I'm so pleased that I met you. I think it was earlier in the year. So happy birthday. See, Gemma's doing moderating tonight for us. Thanks, Gemma. Lee Roscoe's doing it. Alison's doing it. Stargaze Returnal, X Rocket, and let's just get into it, and we'll bring Lee on. Questions in capital letters, please. We've just about got an hour, and we'll see what Lee's got to share with us. Hello, Lee. How are you doing?
Yeah, spot on. Thank you very much for having me.
Listen, it's a pleasure, mate. And I know that some of the things you're going to share with people will resonate. And one of the things that you're going to touch, and I don't know where you want to start with any of this, is a Fae encounter, or you might not have realized it were a Fae encounter at the time. That's what you told me. But we seem to be getting that, Lee. We seem to be getting reports of these elemental beings. And before you do that, just give us a little bit of a background on Lee Solway.
On me? Well, I've done bits and bobs, paranormal podcasts, things like that. I'm currently still doing a podcast as and when, because you know what it's like finding time.
Yeah.
I'm a delivery driver, day job. I sell a few T-shirts on the side, so I've got my fingers in a few pies. But essentially, I'm born and bred in Grimsby, and I didn't have a massive, no family or anything like that was necessarily into the supernatural or anything like that. And a lot of the experiences that I had, I didn't share necessarily with them or anything like that. There's no point really. And, it was only in later years that I really understood what had happened.
Yeah.
But
you said that earlier, and that were interestingly, and that probably applies to a lot of us, that you didn't even realize some of the things that you'd experienced were of a paranormal nature. Yeah.
I mean, again, when we talk about the Fae, it was such a real experience. Does that sound right? Because it was such a real experience that you didn't know it wasn't real.
Yeah. Yeah, you didn't know it weren't something unnatural and
no. You would think that everybody would experience this.
And we're going back to what I think you said about 10 years old. Did you?
10 years old, yeah. So, I mean, do you want me to? I'll talk about that.
Yeah, walk us into it. Yeah. Take as much time as you like, and we'll get we'll get some questions hopefully, and
Yeah,
it might stir people up a bit. Thank you.
I hope so. Yeah, I mean, it was watching your live the other night where you mentioned you was going to do an episode on the Fae, and I thought, I'll message us, because for years I didn't know what it was. I even watched the film. Do you remember the film Labyrinth?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, with David Bowie in it.
Yeah, David Bowie, and that really does. That's encoded in what's going on with the Fae. And I'd watched that, years after, but but looking back on it now, when I watch it with the kids, I'm like, right, I get it now. But yeah, this was, like I say, I was about 10, 11-year-old. It was summer holidays. I do know that, and I do know that I was wanting to get up, get straight out. You know how you do.
Yeah.
I came downstairs and had my cereal, and then I was quickly on the way to meet my mates. Yeah, we all sort of met up in the same area every day. Not a usual thing. Anyway, this particular morning, got up, nothing was different, apart from when I started to walk out the house. I have to go past this, we used to call it cubbyhole. It's essentially the cavity under the stairs. But it has
cupboard under the stairs, yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Full-size door on it. Anyway, the door was rattling. Now, it's an internal door, and it shouldn't be rattling, but it's possible like a cat or something had gotten in there, whatever. So anyway, obviously I go to the door, I open the door, and I was going to use the words to my amazement, but I wasn't amazed, right? And that's the first clue that something here is not right. So I open the door, and there's a little boy inside this cupboard, and he's probably my age roughly, and he starts up a conversation. And he's asked me what I'm doing today and things like that. And I was totally at ease, right? So I'm chatting away with him. I'm off for a water fight with my mates, and we've got it all planned and blah, blah, blah. And this little boy was dressed in what I can describe as like a wizard's outfit. So he had the wizard's hat and some sort of cloak. And it was like purple, and it had... stars or moons, crescent moons, something to that effect dotted around it. Anyway, so we have this conversation. He asked me what I'm up to, blah, blah, blah. And he told me some things about him. And then I said, right, I've got to go because I've arranged to meet my mates. So he shut the door, and I went to, play with my mates. Now, this happened probably, I'm guessing here because I can't tell you definite, but maybe 3 or 4 days in a row.
And did you think of telling your parents?
Never, no. I can't even remember telling my mates. It was such a surreal thing that, like I said before, it didn't feel out of place, even though, looking back on it, it's totally bizarre.
Absolutely.
So we keep having these conversations, and he's telling me things about the world and all sorts of things, and it was interesting to talk to, and it was mostly him doing the talking. Anyway, 3 or 4 days this had gone on. We'd had no issues, right? And every time I said to him, right, I've got to go, he said, yep, no problem, see you tomorrow, whatever. And I'd shut the door, and that'd be it, right? This particular day, things changed. I said to him, right, I've got to go, and he said, oh no, he said, I've got something for you. And from inside his cloak, he takes this what best to describe as a test tube. It probably wasn't, but that's what it looked like. It was glass. And there was a liquid inside it, you could see, and he said, I've got this for you. And I said, well, what is it? I'm not really bothered. And he went, no, it's for you, and you need to drink it. And I said, well, I've just had my cereal and all that, and I don't really want it. And he went, no, you must drink it. And I said, and then we started a conversation about whatever, and then he said it again, you must drink this. I've got this for you. You must drink it. And I said, no, you're right. I'm not interested. I don't need it. And he really started to get aggressive, which was strange because the previous days, there's been no malice whatsoever from, it's just a normal conversation, jovial. And it started to change, and he started to get really aggressive, like overly aggressive, to the point where, I'm going to use this word, he started to unmask himself. Yeah. His disguise, this little boy, what he was coming to me as he wasn't that.
He wasn't. So how did that develop then?
Yeah, that started to slip, and his eyes started to change. They were like going more like, what do you call it, oval shape. and they was getting bigger and they're sort of flashing in and out. And then everything started to change. Then he was basically, I was face to face with what would be easily described for most people listening, not quite, but for most people listening, as a gremlin, from the movie.
And by this time, you're starting to feel frightened, are you? Or?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. At this point, I'm terrified, because this is all happening in split second. From being nicey to this, and it all is about this drink that I will not drink, and I don't know why I didn't drink it, because if I'd gone straight outside that morning after this event, or the day before, and my mate had said, "Hey, I've got a drink for you," I would have took it and drunk it, right? No issue. For whatever reason, and I don't know if it's that stranger danger thing, maybe that was in my head. I've got no idea. I just know that I didn't want to drink this drink. Anyway, so he starts slipping, and eventually I'm confronted with this gremlin-like creature. And again, it's almost like an oval-shaped head. He's got oval-shaped eyes. He's got the ears coming off the side of his head. He's got a real grey skin. His body's grey. I won't say he's slimy, but he's definitely got like a.
Did the clothing change?
The clothing was gone.
Yeah.
At this point, the clothing was even gone.
So this was a mask. This was an illusion that
completely
win you over. Yeah.
And it was only when he started to get agitated that this started to slip. And the more agitated he got, the more he lost control of this disguise, and to the point where he didn't disguise himself at all. And he almost grabbed at me to make me drink this drink. Anyway, I wasn't going to drink it. There was no chance of that. So at this point, obviously, when I'm confronted with this thing, I shut the door. And I remember holding the door, and the door was vibrating, And I'm thinking he's going to come out the door, and I'm screaming, shouting. And eventually, after, it felt like a long time, but it's probably only a few seconds, the door just stopped. And that was it. And I went out, and the experience was kind of done. A few days later, I remember looking in there. Maybe some of my parents asked me to get something from there, and then it only then dawned on me when I opened the door. There's no physical way to stand in there, because my dad's big box for fishing. He had this big wicker box with all his fishing stuff in it. Yeah. That was in there. The Hoover was in there. There was all sorts of.
Yeah, actually, I think everybody's got a cupboard like that on the stairs, haven't they?
He could have stood in there anyway. And it was only then I realised, you know what I mean? What was all that about? But that was it. And for years, it went out of my mind, whatever. And I told people, obviously they didn't believe me, but for years I didn't know what that was all about. And then I run across something years later about this. I think it happened in Sweden, or it's one of the Scandinavian countries anyway, where this there was a shepherd's daughter. She was out tending to the animals, and this guy in a cloak had approached her and said, "Oh, your dad's looking for you. You need to come with me." Took her to this cave. She described it as almost like a cave, but it wasn't, because it was like a rock, and then the door sort of opened up.
Yeah.
Came a cave. Anyway, they went inside, and she was confronted with this banquet. Okay, and these guys were sat around. There's a few of them in there. There was a banquet. There was all that, and there was all feasting on it. And she was asked to sit down and join them. Anyway, she sat down, and for whatever reason, she's like, "No, I'm not eating any of this." And they was like, "Oh no, come on!" Everybody else was eating. There was no issue there. And she was like, "Where's my dad?" Because he said that I need to come here to see my dad, and that's really all she was concerned with. And anyway, they kept her there, and eventually, after what she felt like was about 15, 20 minutes, half an hour tops, they let her go. She went outside, and then she ran into one of the stable hands, one of the lads that worked for the family. She ran into him, and she'd been missing 7 days.
Yeah.
And it came down to this eating this food or drinking.
The offering, yeah.
And obviously she refused to do it, and then they let her go. And then only then I sort of thought back to what had happened to me, and I thought,
he's offering you, this little person's offering you what colour was this liquid? Just out of interest.
Clear, as far as I could tell.
Clear. Mm. Yeah. Do you see? You must see similarities to the story at Willie Howe.
The other day, yeah.
Yeah, the one from the 12th century, that one. I mean, so we're going back a long time, and there's a hole. Once again, you've got similar things, like the girl's story, the cave or the opening under the stairs, the opening in the side of Willie Howe. You know, I don't know whether we can equate an opening under the stairs, but that's what it was essentially, weren't it? An
exactly.
opening.
It was that story, you know. I heard you saying it, talking about it the other day, and there was a feast going on there. I don't know if he was offered any food, was he?
Yeah. I'll just 1 second. Our Laura's in this. Like 1 second, and we'll just a blue shift. Rob's, Mikey, Hezo. Let's have a look. Mag Sue, and Laura, my daughter. So it's always like to say hello to people where we can. Alison's in. Yeah. The story goes that he was travelling between Wold Newton and Burton Fleming, which are close villages, and the burial mound sits in between them. Dead of night. I mean, if this were told in 12th century, obviously it's older than that. I would have think. There's William of Newborough chronicled it, and there's a light near the burial mound near the Willie Howe. Draws up alongside it in his horse. And there's a banquet, and they're having a feast. Hobs, goblins, and fae, and one of them comes outside and offers him a drink, and he won't accept the drink.
Yeah.
And they offer it him. He takes the vessel and pours the contents out. The story goes, and does the runner on his horse. Jumps the Gypsy Race, which is a stream, and these things aren't supposed to be able to cross running water. It's quite convenient, that, isn't it? But the interesting thing, though, Lee, is that there's similarities. So even if these are folk tales, yours isn't. You're giving us a story that's probably we're looking at 30 years old. Do you know what I mean? We're not going back hundreds of years with yours. And I bet you, after listening to this, somebody's going to get hold of it and think, I want to contact this guy because I had a similar experience. And it happens, Lee, and you might find that somebody wants to get in touch and sort of compare notes.
Yeah.
So you know when he changed, because obviously when you described him as in a wizard's outfit with little stars and things on, which was just a guise for you to win you over, when he actually changed into what he was there no clothing whatsoever?
No, I don't think there was. I think he was like, I can only see him from the waist up. Remember, because there's things in there. So even the boy, when he was presenting himself as the boy, he was only from the waist up, which again at the time I didn't notice.
Right.
You know, that didn't seem odd to me. None of it seemed odd to me, which is almost like there's some sort of thing they can do.
Yeah.
If this is a genuine thing that happened and it's not some sort of weird, you know.
Oh God, you've done it again. Sorry about that. I shouldn't jump, should I? But I get that intense listening to you. That everybody be laughing now. She does it on purpose.
But yeah,
what do you do that for?
Yeah, but I could only see him from the waist up. So
yeah,
but that was unclothed. Yeah. It's interesting in that other story where they describe, hobs and goblins, and because this was a goblin. Yeah. Do you remember? I tell you what was, and people will. I mean, I'm aging myself here, I know, but there was an advert on TV years ago. It was for Sprite, the drink.
Yeah.
And it featured a Sprite, the actual goblin style Sprite. And I think there was a guy eating a kebab shop on the I don't know if you'd be able to find this on YouTube maybe, but this guy was eating a kebab and this Sprite was set next to him, and the idea was that sometimes you need a Sprite, the drink.
Yeah, and you're going to say that they looked like that, did it?
It was more similar to that than anything I've ever seen. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, before we move away from that, then Lee, what about? Well, there's two things, and obviously this doesn't detract from your story because we can't answer why. But you'd had your breakfast on each of those mornings, so I'm assuming mum and dad's in, or at least mum's in.
Yeah, they were in bed.
Oh, right, fair crap. Yeah. That's where I'm going with that one. So there's nobody up. You're the first up early, yeah. And I can relate to that because I used to be up and away. I'd be out all over the place, woodlands and running about. But so what about? Stay with the bedroom. What about after you'd had this frightening experience? Did it linger in your mind when you went to bed? Did you think I'm going to wake up and this thing's going to be stood at the side of me?
No, nothing. No, nothing. It was completely. It was bookended. It was like it was done.
Yeah.
That's the bit I can't get. That's the bit I can't really get my head around.
Yeah, it's difficult, but that in a way, Lee, that makes the story more plausible to me because you're struggling with Why weren't I frightened? Why didn't I dwell on this? Do you know what I mean? Why did what it's so blasé about it? And which is what you were. Let's just have a look. I think we've said this, but good job you didn't drink it, Lee. Otherwise, you may have been indebted to them forever. And that's how the story goes, isn't it? You know, you accept something from them. But do you think now, looking back, if you got the experience again, or if something cropped up like that, how would you react next time?
Well, I've seen it again, but it was fleeting. It was years after. It was about Christmas time, and this time it was only presenting itself as like a little tiny thing, but it was essentially in my mum's living room, and it was doing whatever it was doing, and then it clocked that we could see it, I'd seen it, and then it tried to hide. It run behind the chair. We peered over the top of the chair, and it looked up at us and just blinked out.
What? How old were you then?
That was probably a couple of years later, so probably 13-ish year old then. Yeah.
Do you know? I wonder what the circumstances were that I know you don't know, and I can't even surmise. But what to bring it forward?
I've got no idea. I know. I spoke to another lad who'd seen something similar in a grave. I think it was a graveyard. He'd gone there to take pictures, something like that, and he got out the car, and out the corner of his eye, he'd seen these two objects moving around, which he just presumed to be birds or whatever. Yeah. And then when he turned around and looked at them, there was two little grey goblin type creatures fighting over a can, and they were sort of tussling back and forth. And there was a third one, and he was sort of like watching these two, sort of leant back against the fence post, watching these two fight over this can. And it was the third one who clocked that this guy had seen them. And then all three of them just instantly blinked out.
But I mean, your property or your mum and dad's house, then, Lee.
Yeah.
What it isolated, or what it on an estate?
No, it's a terrace. It's a terraced house. Yeah. Weirdly enough, I mean, right. So for years, I thought that because a lot of things happened, and only years later did I sort of put them together as paranormal. I think I told you this before, but. It's a terrace. It's a row of terraced houses. It's actually next door to where I live now. But and for years I wondered if it was something to do with genetics because I've got Irish heritage, right?
Yeah.
And something to do with the Fae or the leprechauns, whatever. And I was living in here, and I'm not seeing anything here or anything like that. And then my daughter, when she was about, say 6, something like that, she went down to the toilet in the middle of the night, and on the way down, she said to me the next morning she'd seen this little creature. Probably only sort of 10 inches tall, a grey little creature, and he was looking. There was some carrier bags in the hallway, and this little creature was looking through the carrier bags, and he was holding his hand like this, and there was an orb sort of floating in his hand, which he was using as a light to look into these bags, and I don't know if there's a genetic thing there. I don't know. It's just
obviously. My girls, they're all grown up, and I think, well, they're a bit as old as you, Sarah. But that must have been frightening. Knowing what you experienced, and you didn't know the gravity of what you were experiencing at the time, and potentially there's got to be a grain of truth in these things from folklore, where if you accept something from these elemental beings, somehow you were indebted to them, like Steve said. And then you're telling me that your youngster I'd seen this little being. Did you get a little shiver of like, whoa, I don't like this?
Yeah, that made me like stop, because I was like, well, that's interesting, isn't it? And obviously I didn't do the usual thing of, oh, you're just dreaming it and that. I said to her, it's quite possible these things do exist. I know it's hard to believe, but they do.
Well, you'd have been a bit of an hypocrite if you'd have started. Obviously, you don't encourage it and frighten her, but you've got to remain open-minded due to what you've seen.
Yeah, but she said it clocked her, and as soon as it clocked her, it just blinked out. So
yeah.
But what it was looking for and why it was there and how often it's there, I've got no idea because I've never seen it. But
well, not the Fae, but years ago, all girls were living at home, and Laura and Gemma are in here now. They may remember me and Mary had been out. And typical of me, Mary would just leave me. I'd sit watching telly. She'd say, "You're going to go to bed." I said, "No, I'll stay up a bit." And I'd just fall asleep. So she'd put TV off, and I'd sort of wake up sat on sofa in darkness. But and we'd got a staffy, little staffy, and I woke up in the darkness, and I knew dog were outside of me. You could feel dog, and I'm asleep, or I'm awake, but my eyes are shut, and I just opened my eyes, and there was about as big as an orange, a big orange. There's a sphere of light on my knee. It's literally on my right knee. It's there. I don't know whether it's settled on it or just above it. And I didn't feel any fear, but dog weren't moving. And as I looked at it, it just exploded into just millions of little glitter, into little bits of glitter. And I remember saying, wow, do that again. And I just sat there in darkness. Nothing happened again. But, you know, that's as closest I think I've got to these spheres of light and little things like that. But, no, it's fascinating. There's a question here. We'll just put this up from Andy. Did anyone in your family ever experience anything paranormal in the house?
Yeah.
Besides yourself?
That house, yeah. Only, my brother saw a shadow man coming up the stairs. No, going down the stairs, sorry. And that was, as far as I know, that's it.
Okay, we'll just move. I'll just move down a bit before we move on, because I think we've probably covered that, Lee, haven't we? You know, you've pretty much give us a detailed description of that, but I'm not sure we've any more questions on that. But I'm just running down. One sec. Let's have a look. No, let's have a look. Something about UFO out at sea. Hazel. Let's have a look at this. My kids were 3 and 4, and I always talked about these little elves and fairies visiting every morning. I used to wake up and would hear them having conversations with something creepy. I'm assuming, Hazel, that you're talking about you could hear your children having conversations with something creepy. And that's kind of interesting in itself, because a lot of children have imaginary friends, don't they?
Do.
And I don't know how many people in chat have experienced that. I don't think I had any, but I know a lot of people do. But what's interesting is, as they get older, they seem to forget about them.
Do, yeah. And there is this it's been long established, this thinning of the veil. When you're younger, you seem to have more paranormal, be able to experience the paranormal a little bit easier.
Yeah.
The cranium, is it where it fuses together?
Yeah.
I wonder if it's something like that. It's almost like we've got a sunroof which open, and then as you get older and that closes up, I wonder if it just stops.
It could be. I suppose there's loads of reasons why, but I remember used to visit my granddad in Scotland, and he had 2 children after when he left my gran to another lady, and I remember one of them talking about her sister having these imaginary friends, and they could hear her talking to them. They couldn't hear it. It was a one-way conversation as far as their ears were going, and it was just, a sister's voice talking. But it went on for years. But she could hardly remember anything about it. And I find that fascinating, because it's almost like the alien abduction scenario. A lot of people, as it's over and as it gets further away from you, the memories seem to drop out of the back of your head. So, and sometimes, Lee, people have spoke about remembering something, and then, I've got to talk about it, and then you just can't hold on to it. It's gone.
I mean, that's a good segue into the UFO, what I saw, because...
Please do, tell us about it, yeah.
The memory aspect of it is, again, it's more intriguing to me than the actual scene of the craft, although that is, amazing, looking back on it now. So, again, I'm probably around the same age, 11, 12, 13-year-old, whatever. And we used to play, me and my mates used to play this game, and we used to call it tracky. It's a form of tag. Yeah. Probably have, different words.
Different versions of it in different areas. Yeah, forget it.
It was tag, but it was in 2 teams. So you had an area where if you got caught, you had to go in this area, then your teammates could rescue you. And then once you was all captured, it was game over. So, long story short, we gets down to this where we normally played it, and there was like a playing field, and then it butted onto some offices, and there was a wooden fence in between the two. And we decided that we was going to make a rat run underneath this fence, so that when we play this game, we'd have a secret entrance
getaway
that the team know about. Yeah. So we're there, and we start digging in the ground, and we start digging under this fence. Now this was a little bit more difficult than we anticipated, and we never brought a spade or anything like that. And my brother, being my brother, decided that he wasn't going to do this because it was a bit too difficult. So he decided he was going to lay on this tree. So he's laid out on this tree, just looking at the stars, and me and Gary are digging this thing. Anyway, this goes on for a few minutes, and my brother turns around to us and he says, "Hey, that star up there is moving." So we stop what we're doing and we go and have a look. And I mean, the easiest way to describe it, particularly for the English viewers, is that if you held a 2p piece at arm's length, that was about the size of the moon in the sky.
Yeah.
If you held a penny at arm's length, that was about the size of this star. So it's huge. And you know, nice to see planets, things like that. And we didn't think anything of it as kids. But if you kept your eye on it, you know, you could see it was moving. But we just sort of looked at it and we said, "Nah, it's not moving." And we carried on what it was doing. Anyway, about 10 minutes goes past. So, and he says, "No, that star is definitely moving."
He's still laid on trees.
They're watching it, yeah. So we're digging away. And anyway, he says it is moving. So we stop what we're doing and we go to look at it again. And I remember I was just about to turn away because I was just about to say, "No, it's not," again. I mean, that's how subtle it was moving. But you could only see that it was moving because it was moving closer to the moon. If the moon
had no reference, you wouldn't have known. Yeah.
No. So right at that split second where I'm turning to him to say it's not moving, it was like bang, like that. And it was a craft. And it was probably, I'm estimating, probably 100 feet above us, something like that. I mean, if you picked up a stone, it probably could have.
What instant that, Lee? That was just instant.
Yeah, it was this. And again, it was that thought I had in my head of saying, just about to say to him, "No, it's not moving." And then it was bang, it was there. It was almost like it it knew that we'd seen it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know that sounds weird, but that's
it doesn't.
I got. So anyway, so it's there, and weirdly enough, it was shaped like two overlapping circles, and I've seen something similar, and I'll go on to that in a minute. But it was two overlapping circles essentially, and it looked from underneath. It looked like the old. Do you remember the old reels that you used to get in the cinema or put film on?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah,
and they'd have the little cutouts in them. The circle. That's what these two circle parts of it looked like from underneath. There's no lights on it. There's no sound, and it had like a static, and I can't remember if it's audible or if you could see it, but it had like a static effect to it.
Yeah, almost a like sparkling type effect.
Yeah, almost like oil on water.
Right. Okay.
You know, that sort of shimmer. But it had that around it, and again, it was it was only probably 100 feet, and I'm estimating because I've been underneath a Chinook helicopter, I've been underneath the Vulcan bomber. And I think they're about 100 meters long,
right,
around that area. And this was pretty much in that sort of ballpark, so 100 meters long, and then what the width for the circles were. Anyway, we're looking at it, and it's just there, and it's stationary right above us. And there was a guy walking across the park, just walking his dogs, a couple of Alsatians. Anyway, he's walking towards us. And he hadn't noticed this at all. I mean, that's how quiet this thing is. There's no sound.
I was going to say that. What about sound? But you've got that one.
There's no sound. And apart from this static, and I can't remember if that was audible or not. You know, I know static makes the noise, doesn't it? You know, if you get it on the TV or whatever, you get that. But
did you feel it, Lee? Did you feel anything? Did you feel the static? I know
you feel something, but it'd be difficult to describe what. You knew you knew it was under you. You could feel it. It was almost like a weighty feeling, and an actual, anything like that. But anyway, this guy's walking across, and one of us shouted out to this guy, "Hey, Mister!" And I still remember the words, "Hey, Mister, what's that?" Pointing up, And this guy's walking along, minding his own business, and he looks up. He sees this. He's got 2 dogs with him or 3 dogs with him, and they're not even reacting whatsoever. And he looks up at this thing, and as soon as he's seen it, he took off running. Right. That was the first moment that we felt any sort of jeopardy or anything like that. We knew at that point, well, this is something that, this adult is running away.
He's obviously got your best interests at heart, hasn't he? Because he's on his toes. He's gone.
Yeah, he's gone. Yeah. Tail and gone. So we immediately start moving off as well. So we're running. You sort of have to run away from home to come back on yourself. So we're running away from home. And as we're running, this thing starts moving the same direction as we do. And then it just zipped, and as far as I could tell, it just zipped and it went back to a star. up in the sky again. So it went, from this position to that position, and that were it. Now that's odd, right? That's interesting, and to me, the way it knew he was looking at it and showed itself shows that thing, that craft, and I don't know if the craft's it got things on board. I don't know.
Yeah, as in intelligent life on board, or whether it's a drone of some kind.
Yeah, exactly. To me, it felt like that thing was conscious of us. It linked into us somehow. There's no way it could have seen. Well, I say there's no way it could have seen us, but you'd assume it couldn't see us from where it was. But it knew he was looking at it, and it knew he was thinking about it. And I don't know if we brought it down. I know you've had some people say to you, "You're bringing this down."
You're bringing down the light, but immediately when you talked about that, Lee, in the first book, Truth Proof 1, I wrote what I called the intermind connection, and it came to me, and you'll relate to this with your story from a fisherman who'd been up on the cliff tops rock angling in the winter, and it was early evening. As you know, it gets dark, 4, 5 o'clock, and he's up there on his own. Everything's shut up, the RSPB and that, and he's up on one of these. He's gone over at stand and he's on edge at cliff and he's just minding his own business, and he looks, sky's amazing, but he sees a star that he can't identify. And I'm not saying he'd have known what Orion's belt was or what picking out stars, but when you look up in the sky, if you see something that don't quite fit, and they sit there observing for hours, don't they, fishing. And he's looking at this star and he's focused on it. And then all of a sudden it's straight over at top of him. It's on him. And he's looking up and he says, all the grass lit up like silver. He says, it like everything was monochrome. And he would sort of caught in the glare, this beam of light that had come down onto him. And as fast as that happened, bang, it's gone. It's back to being a star. So there's similarities. You thought that, you thinking about that connected with it. I honestly believe that happens. I don't pretend to know how. You know what I mean?
The odds on him stood there and that thing was going to be there anyway, and then you know what I mean. The odds on that is just not happening, is it? So it's the same.
Yeah, you absolutely make a brilliant point there, Lee. Yeah, the odds of that thing actually moving and being directly above him with a beam of light.
But he's seen it,
Yeah, it's just not happening, is it? Does your brother still talk about it?
Well, this is what I'm getting onto, because this is the weird thing, right? So that in itself is strange, right? And I remember running home. We have something we call the gas alley. I remember running down the gas alley. And we all took different directions. So me and my brother went this way. And my mate Gary went straight on. And from that moment on, right, it's as if it never happened, right? We never spoke about it. There was not even a memory of it. Okay, so years later. And I'm talking probably 15 years later or something like that. I'm sat at home one night and I'm flicking through the channels on the TV, trying to find something to watch. And I come across this channel, this real obscure cable channel, and it had a program called, which you'll probably know now, most people watching will probably know. It was a program called Rich Planet TV.
Yeah.
With Richard Dior. And it was when he was on cable, and it was like, I say, a real obscure channel. And I was just flicking through the channels, and it came on, and he started up, and it was weird to hear a Geordie accent on TV then, and that was the first thing that intrigued me. I thought, oh, this is different, Northern accent. So I just left it on, and I wasn't massively into the paranormal or anything like that, Anyway, but this was on, and I just started watching it, and in this episode, he showed this lady, and I think she was elderly. I think she was from Wales, and she drove up to these traffic lights. And she said she was stationed at these traffic lights, and he'd done like a computerized, mock-up of this.
Yeah.
And this ball of light, or this star, was opposite of these traffic lights. Anyway, she's watching this star, and like you said, she's like, that's out of place. That's not normally there. She's watching it, and the next thing, it's showing itself as a craft, and she described it as a dumbbell shape. So it was like two circles, and then like a bridge in the middle.
Yeah.
Which could have been similar to what we saw.
Yeah, you're talking about those two reels, aren't you? That are semicircles.
It was almost. It was almost connected. So, but it was similar anyway. And then it went back to a star, and then that was the end of the experience. But watching that, just as that happened, just all the memories came back. I say all the memories. Most of the memories of that night came back. And so this is 15 years later, and I've not even thought about it once. Right?
There's a trigger.
Yeah, that triggered it. So I immediately contacted my brother, and I'm like, "You've got to come round and see this." So I brought him round, sat him down, made him watch it, and didn't tell him what it was. And I just thought, I wonder if he'll remember it. Anyway, he sat there, and then he watched it, and he said, "Yeah, that's what we saw." So he'd remembered it, like just like that. And it was him that sort of remembered the real effect underneath it. And then as he was talking and telling me, we were sort of sharing the experience, memories kept coming back. And you hear about this, and it's like, that to me is almost stranger than seeing the craft, because if you see I know people say if you see something traumatic, the brain can tuck it away
down, shut it away, and
I get that to some extent, but this wasn't a traumatic event. This was.
But you don't. I'm not. Listen, Lee, you were there. I wasn't. But what's going through my head when you said this wasn't a traumatic event? That man turned and ran.
Oh, it was odd for him. Definitely.
So obviously traumatic for him, but three young lads, I don't know, caught in like rabbits in headlights, just looking up at it. He obviously thought there was something traumatic there, didn't he? He thought,
And I have thought back about that. What would we have done if he wasn't there? Because, I still, and I know, I joke about it, but I say we'd still be stood there today. Still just stood there looking up at it. I didn't.
No missing time then. No missing time.
Well, I don't know. All I remember is seeing it and running home, and then not talking about it for all those years. And if anything else happened in between, I've got no idea. We weren't known time-wise because we just was out and
young lads, you're not looking at it, are you? You're not even. You probably didn't even know what time it was when it happened.
This was the days before phones and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So you wouldn't have even had any reference, really. I mean, we used to come home and my mum used to whistle for us. That was our. She used to go out and whistle. I mean,
you knew that your tea were ready or something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just going to jump back. I will probably, we've covered this probably, but any accounts from distant family? Rod asks. I don't know whether there is.
Well, yeah, not distant family. I mean, my granddad had a time slip experience, which was very odd. I mean, my granddad was a trawlerman, and he was, merchant navy, all that, like salt of the earth sort of. And he didn't believe any of this. He wasn't even religious or anything like that. And he was, and this is odd because he was, and we're not genetically linked either. We used to call him a granddad, but he was like a step granddad or whatever you call it. Yeah. But he had an experience where he was down at the pub, and these two lads, he overheard these two. He was always looking to make a quick buck, right? Yeah. And these two lads were talking, and they needed a trailer, and he had a trailer. So he said to these, "Hey, there was something about this guy. I'd let him down." And he said, I can jump in and take you to it. So they said, "Yeah, great stuff." And it turned out that these guys were some sort of fabricators, and they built like a staircase to go on the side of a barn somewhere in the Lincolnshire Wolds.
Yeah.
And he had the trailer, so stuck it on the trailer, drove out to this location, fabricated some of it, and then drove back, and then went back the next day to fabricate the second part, and that was it, job done. But incidentally, at lunchtime, they'd gone back to this pub. So they went back to this pub, and this pub, when you walked in, it had all of the brasses on the wall. The horse brasses.
Horse brasses, yeah.
Right, yeah. And it had pictures of Shire horses and things like that. And it was, traditional oak beam sort of,
typical country pub.
And he got talking to the guy who run the place, and he was asking him about the thing. It was a local artist, and my granddad was a bit of a painter. He was an artist. He really painted trawlers and things like that. But he was always trying to perfect painting the horses. That was his thing that he just could never get quite how he wanted it.
Very difficult, I'm told. Yeah.
Yeah, this guy was really good. These Shire horses were great. So anyway, they had the dinner. Say Saturday, Sunday, they did the same thing. And then he said, "All right, I'm going to go back there and speak to that local artist," because the bloke had told him he's a local artist just up the way. So this maybe would have been 6 months, and he had the opportunity. He had some spare time. He thought, "Right, I'm going to go back." So he drove back to where that area was, whatever it was called, and he went past the barn that they'd fitted this staircase on. That's still there, no problem. He drove to the pub, parked up, went inside the pub, and there was no horse brasses, no pictures, nothing. And he was thinking, right, it was 6 months down the line, whatever it was, maybe they've got new owners.
Yeah.
He went and spoke to the new guy who was there behind the bar, and he said, hey, what's happened to the brasses and all that? And, the pictures, what's happened to the pictures mainly, because he was interested in them. And the bloke said, what pictures? And he said, the pictures on the wall, the shire horses and that. He said, there's been no pictures on here. He said, you think he'd had the place at five years or so at that point.
But obviously your granddad's thinking this is a new owner.
Yeah. New owner. This guy's had it 5 years, and he's never. It wasn't. There was one up there. Anyway, this owner went and got these pictures. There's some pictures in one of the back corridors of this pub of how it used to be, and he brought these pictures out and he showed him, and yeah, there it was. The pictures showed this place with the brasses and all the rest of it, and as far as we know, it hadn't been like that for about 30 years or something daft like that. And this local artist, the guy who actually painted these pictures, he'd been dead a long time. I think he died during the war or something. So,
what did he think then? To be, like you said, you've described him, salt of the earth.
He thought
black and white.
Yeah, he thought we must have had the wrong pub, right? Even though he knew, because he drove back to where they built this thing, drove back again, looking up and down the road, thinking there must be another pub on here. There's no other pub. So he's thinking there's got to be that pub. So he went back to where he originally met these two guys. He didn't know them. They was in the Royal Oak, and he was in the Royal Oak. So he went back to the Royal Oak, and he asked a few fellas in there about these two lads. Did you know him? And he was trying to get hold of them, see if they could remember which pub it was. Anyway, this is where it gets really weird. I mean, this is weird anyway. So one guy says to him, oh, it's, say, Joe and Dave. And he says, right, well, I need to get hold of him. He says, right, well, Dave works down at such and such. So he goes driving down there to this place, and he goes in and he says, oh, I'm trying to find this bloke, Dave. And the bloke says, so you're going to have an hard time with that? He said, well, what do you mean? He said, he died 3 months ago. All right. So he's like, well, that's no good. I'm sorry about that. Right? That's not going to help me with my finding this pub. So he goes, right, I'll go find this Joe. So he asked it took him a few months to work out where this Joe lived, but eventually he got the address for him, drove to the address. It was out of town. When he drove there, knocked on the door, he met his wife, and she told him that he'd died a few months ago as well in a traffic accident. So these two guys had died independently of each other. Yeah. And then he thought, it was almost like that film, Final Destination. He thought, well, hang on a minute, you know what I mean? These two have gone, and maybe I'm next. And then he was for quite a few months. He was a bit worried, a bit panicked like. But yeah, I mean, he lived till 72, so nothing.
Did it change his perspective on things then, or some people, my mind's made up, I don't believe in any of that. So
no,
I'm not changing it.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I mean, he had a couple of, the old books like the Unsolved Mysteries and things like that. He got a couple of them books and he read them, but he never really. Just said it. It's one of those things that happen. It's a matter of fact, and then it's like, what do you want for your dinner?
Great story though, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's an interesting story. Just before we move on, because I know there's another a shared UFO experience, and I hope we're going to get to it because it's fascinating. But we'll just have a look at. We'll not dwell on this one, but Lisa's just said, I've seen beings with light orbs. And that's similar to what the guy in New Zealand come out with this morning, but we'll get to that one. Let's have a look here. Could be an attachment to an object person from the old country. Beer Monster says. Beer Monster, great name, that, isn't it? Yeah. And are we talking about it's an attachment?
Yeah, I've got this. I'll show you.
Okay.
I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, the pipe. It looks like a briar, is it?
That's shillelagh.
Okay.
Yeah, and the weird things in this house only happened when I brought this.
Really?
Yeah. So
there's something for another story, another stream, Lee, because I can see that we're not going to get. I'm just going down these. Let's have a look. Question for both. These lights, etc. at night. Are we supposed to them, or supposed to what them, or do you think it's a mistake? Are we supposed to? I'm assuming. Are we supposed to try and encourage them? I'll take that from your story, or would that be a mistake? I don't know, Rod. I really don't know. I mean, it were a mistake it would have been a big mistake if we jump back to the little being under the stairs, if Lee had probably had a drink from whatever it offered him. Yet,
I mean,
that, good.
He never told me what I'd get for drinking that drink, did he? So, you know,
well, probably if he'd have told you, that'd have been even more reason not to drink it, wouldn't it? You know.
Yeah.
Let's have a look what Richard's got. Let's have a look here. Lee, do you know if there's a natural stream running under your house or anywhere close? I would think.
A what? Sorry.
A stream running.
I mean, this is all marshland in Grimsby, isn't it? So.
Yeah, well, we've got quite a few questions in, and I'm not going to get through them all, people. I realise that. Yes, they would have separate conversations, and they both remember them. They said that they were lights and would turn into holograms. Yeah, do you know, it's strange. I mean, even with cryptid scenario, people talk about seeing lights in forests and woodlands, don't they? If you've got hope to add to any of these, Lee, you just say, and we'll just keep going. Let's have a look. We've got Scotch Mist here. My brother used to say he saw little green men at the window, dismissed by the adults. Maybe it was true. A window on the first floor. Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, briefly, what colour was that little man when you saw its true colour?
Grey.
Yeah. Could you have mistaken it for a grey alien?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the eyes were more human-like, but there was oval in shape, but there was more human-like. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, if you'd seen that thing like this guy at the window, something like that, I think, you'd say it was grey alien. But yeah. But are some of the face stories not talking about aliens, you know?
Well, I think so. You know, I mean, are these the aliens, what we're dealing with today from folklore when people talk about these little beings? And that's not to detract. I mean, it was alien, weren't it? It were alien to everything you knew and understood anyway, you know. So I'm just scrolling down as I'm talking to you, and it looks like, if I've missed questions here, I'm sorry. So I won't say we've got 10 minutes left, and we're all right if it goes over 5 minutes, but tell us about this shared experience, because we don't know. I'm saying we, as though I've experienced it. You don't actually know if it were a UFO sighting, but it becomes interesting.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, it's like the other things, you know, you see the thing, and then the lead up or the aftermath is more intriguing than the actual seeing of the thing. But yeah, this was the same thing. This was so I'm not a dreamer, you know, and I'm not a very avid dreamer or anything like that. But this particular night, I woke up in my dream. I woke up and I'm in bed. And I can hear this noise like this, and it's constant. And I'm thinking, where's that coming from? Now, we have got a transformer type thing down the end of the street, and if it's
wet or a bit of moisture, you can hear it. Yeah.
And this is louder than that. And I'm thinking, you know, and I remember thinking this, and I wake up and I'm like, so I start following it, and I start following it through the house, and now I'm following it, and it gets downstairs, and it's coming from the back of my house. So I walks outside, and I walks into the garden, and then I can really hear it, and then I look up.
And this is the dream state still.
Yeah, as far as I know, I'm asleep at this point. So I see this craft, and incidentally, only recently I saw a picture of a guy from, I think it was Fife in Scotland, who took this picture of a UFO, and it's like a ring of lights around the outside and the ring of lights in the middle. Now that's pretty much bang on what I saw, and I'll go into why. So I see this craft, and as a ring of lights in the middle, ring of lights on the outside, and I mean the sky's dark and this craft's dark, and I saw an orb of light or something go inside it through the middle, and then next thing I know, I'm back in bed waking up, right? And I'm like, that was really weird, because I felt like that was real,
a living dream almost. You know, it's that real.
You know, and I never had a lucid dream or anything like that in my life. So anyway, I go about in business, think nothing of it. It's a dream, yeah, no worries. So I go to work, you know, and this is probably a day later. I mean, it's pretty close. I get a phone call, panic phone call, about 2:30 in the afternoon, and it's the current girlfriend, my wife at the time. And she's ringing me, and she's in panic mode, and I'm trying to calm her down on the phone. And she tells me this story. So she says, I was having a nap because she went to pick the kids up about 3 o'clock-ish from school. So she's having a little nap just before that. And she was laying on the settee, this is daytime, and she woke up to this humming noise, right? And she follows this humming noise and it leads her out the back of the house. She's telling me this on the phone. So it leads her out the back of the house, and she went out in the garden and she looked up and there was this spaceship, that's what she said, spaceship above the house. So I said to her, can you describe the spaceship? And she said, well, it was circle, but it had square edges. And I was like, do me a favor. I said, can you draw it? Draw what you see, and then I'll see you when I get home. So anyway, I get home and she drawn it on an envelope, and I looked at it, and it was almost like it's like an octagon shape, but it's not. It's more squished than an octagon. Yeah. And it almost looks circle, but it's not. They are subtly straight edges on this thing.
Yeah. Which
again, is strange, because if she'd drawn a triangle or a circle or the traditional UFO shapes, I won't be having this conversation with you now. The fact she didn't draw that, she drew exactly what I'd seen the previous night. And when she saw it in her dream, it was daytime. When she was asleep, it was daytime. When I saw it, it was nighttime. When I was asleep, it was nighttime.
Which is fascinating. I've picked up on that actually as you were saying, because when you first started with it, Lee, I thought you've probably been in the same bed and you've shared this dream.
Yeah.
But so I didn't realize that. That's just amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and that makes you wonder if there's more to it, doesn't it? Because why did it draw us outside? Because at this point, I'm pretty convinced that wasn't just a dream.
Yeah.
Because again, I never spoke to her about it because she's not no interested in UFOs, things like that anyway. So, it's not a priority of hers whatsoever. So she wouldn't have been interested if I'd had a dream about a spaceship, would she? So
no.
So I never even mentioned it, and for her, but she knew there was something more to it because she rung up in an absolute state of panic. And dreams don't do that traditionally.
No.
People have nightmares, but you wouldn't wake up from a nightmare and immediately ring somebody.
No, you wouldn't. No. How did it make her feel when you explained that you'd had a dream that were remarkably similar? What did she say to that?
Extremely upset, to the point where a few days later, I was playing a game in the living room, and it must have been Christmas time because we had a sound bar in them days, and she'd put tinsel over this sound bar. I don't know why. Anyway, it was getting late. It was getting late, and she was going to take the baby to bed. So she comes in, she says good night, and as she's turned away to go upstairs, she's knocked this tinsel off the soundbar, and it's just rolled off. But as it's rolled off, it turned the volume right up. And as I'm playing this game, I think it was a game called Fallout 4. These craft, periodically fly over the top of your head, and they make that humming noise, right? So as I'm playing this, so she's turned the soundbar up. This craft comes over, and she's halfway upstairs, and it starts through the house. And I've gone to turn the soundbar down, and she's come running down in absolute hysterics, thinking that thing's come back.
I think it's there. Yeah, I see you. Yeah.
And I don't know if you say triggered, but that was, it gave her that emotion straight away.
It's absolutely amazing. And Lee, an hour's flown, and let's just check what questions we've got. If you're okay for 5 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I'm not sure that there is many, but Andy Ross, how many people do see things when children and just dismiss it? Well, yeah, we've covered that, Andy, and you're so right. And obviously, with political correctness and the way the world is, you couldn't. Parents could ask the children, couldn't they? But you, as a distant or somebody unconnected to them, you couldn't admire, as you couldn't ask questions now. You couldn't do any of that, could you? But Andy Ross, the Ghost Whisperer,
on that question, guy. Paul, that was the thing with my daughter. See, I didn't want to dismiss it out of hand because if it was real what she'd seen, I didn't want her to think, nobody believes me. But at the same time, you feel like you don't want to encourage it too much because you don't want.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a thin line, isn't it?
Yeah, you don't want to come back with loads of different things, and then you start thinking, well, hang on a minute. But she never did. She never saw anything. Just that
But
one.
you maybe handled it perfectly, because one day, I don't know, when she's in her 20s or 30s, she's going to go, do you know, I told you that and you didn't believe me.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like you may have done, I don't know, with your parents or anything, you know, but well, let's have a look what Stephen Collins says. Thanks for sharing your accounts, Lee. It takes some doing, I know. And Steve's shared some of the things that have happened. Oh, let's have a look to himself. And it's great that people do that. Let's have a look here. Rachel Mattel, what year and month was this? Well, there's a few accounts there, Rachel, but the last one, Christmas, you said, didn't you?
Yeah, that must have been around Christmas time, because the tinsel was on the thing. Yeah, the other ones would have been summertime, because I know he's out and about. So
yeah, this one's for me, but it looks a bit. Question, Paul, what are your thoughts on the Daily Star photo? Oh, yeah, it seems to be, there's a lot of talk on social media in East Yorkshire about it, and that's the photograph that Philip Kinsella took. I mean, I'm not involved in that, but I was there when the photograph was took. There were nobody there. And I think that they're trying to label it a werewolf. I wouldn't have called it a werewolf. I don't know what it was. They were just something in photograph, but but you know, Philip and Ron are the two great guys. They're as genuine as they come. I'm not sure that they probably thought it were going to get that kind of reception, but there you go. Let's have a look at this question here. Studio 211 Productions. Have you since talked about to your parents the thing under the stairs?
yeah. I mean, I did that back in them days, but you know, no one believes you, do they?
No, no.
You know, if I hadn't seen the things that I did on the Fae all those years later, I don't think I ever would have mentioned it.
Yeah. You make a good point, and I like the bit where you talked about the trigger and you watched the Richard D. Hall program, and it just sort of flicked a switch on, and the memories came flooding back. Just briefly, the lady in 1967 who had the strange experience walking across from Bridlington to Bessinby, and she, after talking to me, she contacted her then boyfriend. You know, obviously a lot of years and a lot of water gone under the bridge, and he said to her, "Can you remember the owl?" And she says all them years had gone past, and I think she told me in 2016, and it was 1967 when it happened. And until he said there was a huge white owl flying over the top in circles around them, she'd forgot. That was the trigger. It was weird, and there must be so many things like that. Let's just have a quick look.
Make you wonder how many people are walking around that have seen things. The only people that say I've never seen anything, but they might have seen something. They're not
aware, yeah, or they've not connected it. Let's have a look here. Dave Barker. Any positivity from taking gifts in folklore? I don't know. From what I've read, it's pretty negative. I mean, Andy Ghost Whisperer might know a little bit about that. Incidentally, if you're ever up Durham, he does ghost walks. They're absolutely brilliant, I'm told. So, and he's a good guy. I've met Andy.
Years ago on YouTube, who had this castle in Ireland, and his family had been given that castle to him by the offerings from taking offerings, and but they had to do something, for him. But I don't think he ever said what. But he still lives there today. Really,
and that's the story. Well, it brings me to mind of the one from Willie Howe, because there's a few stories of elves, goblins, and the Fae, and I spoke about it the other week. And the story is that one of the female of the Fae, of the fairies, was sweet on a man from the village, and when he visited the mount, she used to give him a piece of gold, and every time he came, he'd get a piece of gold, and the condition was that he never, so he's accepted a gift, hasn't he? So I suppose that's a positive, Dave, until you sort of renege on the deal or do something wrong, because the deal was that he never spoke about where he got the gold from, and he became wealthy, and he did speak about where he got the gold from, and visited one day and got beaten quite cruelly by unseen hands. So can
you imagine on his wedding night if she turns back to the goblin?
Could you imagine if you get like the thing that masked? Are you okay for a minute? Still, Paul, can you get your daughters on for a discussion on childhood experiences? That's a good idea, Rod. I'll speak to them. I don't know who'd come on. I mean, Gemma's in chat, but she's not really had any. I said that through the Truth Proof books. there's not a lot that Gemma would contribute to this. That's why when she had a few experiences a few years ago in this property, I knew it were real, because others are sort of talking on the level about it, but Gemma dismisses everything unless she can see it with her own eyes. She's going to dismiss it. And where are we going? I think we've just about. Oh, right. Let's have a look. Thanks, Lee. Thank you, Jane. Fascinating. An hour went too fast. I agree. Would you come back on, Lee?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, because we'll just give them a taster. We've done the shared dream. So what else would you like to share with us on another Sunday when your time allows?
Yeah, I mean, there's the obviously my main focus these days is the wild man of the UK. You know, because I saw what I saw. You know, so we could definitely go on to that. I did see a shadow man, which people would maybe find interesting if they find that interesting.
Yeah, I wrote it down. I didn't know how far we'd get with these, and I'm pleased that there's at least two kind of really ones that we can go into detail there, and we'll do that in a few Sundays' time. Then, if that's possible, people in chat, if you've not pressed the like and subscribe, please consider doing so. And I just want to thank Lee for giving us an hour of his time tonight. Thank you guys for obviously supporting us. And as far as I'm concerned, I'll leave the last good night to you, Lee.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for having me, and good night. And get your questions in, guys, because we'll answer them on the next one.
Thank you very much. Good night. Bye.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Saw it twice, so I was like, oh my God.
That was just weird.
I always used to see a light coming up,
Yeah.
like a headlight, but there was nobody there.